I'm Caroline Moderesi-Tirani. You're watching HuffPost Live. Last year, the hashtag GamerGate caused a storm on the internet, and along with a less talked about debate surrounding ethics in gaming journalism, was a very vocal conversation around online harassment. Well, today we're hearing from some of the women caught up in the heart of that aspect of the GamerGate conversation about their stories and how things have changed in the last year since the hashtag went viral. Well, joining me now are Brianna Wu, the head of development at Giant Space Cat, Shannon Sun Higginson, the filmmaker behind the documentary Get the Fuck Out, a film about women in gaming, and Jenny Hanover, founder of Not in the Kitchen Anymore. So welcome everyone, thank you very much for being here today. And Brianna, I'm going to start with you. So over the last couple of days, we've heard here on HuffPost Live from members of the GamerGate community, those who consider themselves pro and also those who are anti-GamerGate, but specific to the hashtag GamerGate. What does the hashtag GamerGate mean to you?
Sure. Well, it's very personal for me. A lot of people have gotten to know the stories of what happened to me and other women in gaming this year as we've been, run out of our home. Personally, I've had 150 death threats sent to me. I've had friends of mine that have been swatted. GamerGate, the hashtag, follows me around professionally now with everything I do. I did a piece for The Guardian last week. They turned the comments into a sewer, and it's kind of the way that they operate. So there's the pretext and the subtext. The pretext is it's about ethics in gaming journalism. But if you go to a site like Kotaku in Action, which is kind of their unofficial headquarters, you can see the majority of what they talk about is they're very angry at women talking about equality in video games like myself. So, they actually don't spend time discussing ethics. They spend a lot more time talking about harassing feminists.
So, I'm glad that you raised up this sort of manifold aspect of this conversation because, yesterday the conversation we had was about the idea of ethics in gaming journalism.
Sure.
And we also want to give space today for what a lot of people have said is very real for them, this idea of the space that they are receiving harassment in. So, you mentioned a piece you wrote for The Guardian. I want to quote one actually that you wrote for The Guardian last year where you said, GamerGate isn't the problem. It's a symptom of an industry that is deeply sexist and unable to understand it. So unpack that for us, Brianna.
Sure. So I think it's really important that people think about the problem as it exists through our industry. So gamers are kind of the victims here. Gamers get a culture that is set from the top down. It's set by publishers. It's set by the games press. It's set by the people that market games. So the product that gamers have been getting for the last 30 years is deeply sexist. I think most people can look at the game industry and see the hypersexualized way that women are portrayed there. So, gamers are constantly getting this signal from game developers, from game press, that it's a space that belongs to men. They didn't create that assumption. The game industry did. So to me, it's not very surprising that, now that women are kind of making more inroads professionally, a lot of gamers kind of feel like their turf is being, encroached on. So I think the big problem here is I think men in my field, because I'm a professional game developer and a software engineer, I think those men think the problem is GamerGate. GamerGate is a symptom. The disease is this kind of sexism that's just built into the tech industry and really built into the game industry. I want to leave you with just one more stat. So in technology as a whole, the assumption is all programmers are kind of this male stereotype. But if you look at technology as a whole, 20% of programmers are women in my field. Yet in the game industry, we are only 3% of programmers. It's the same resume, same skills. So I think it's important to ask, what is causing that severe disconnect in this field? And the answer is women are just not welcome here in ways the men in the game industry are not willing to think about.
Okay, so Jenny, I want to take that to you. Do you feel as a woman in the industry that you are unwelcomed in the industry?
A lot of the times, yes. It's everything from getting into a gaming lobby, because I'm just a gamer. I'm not actually working within the game industry, but I've been a gamer my entire life. Sometimes you can get into a game lobby and you just want to play a round of Call of Duty or something like that, and you'll just instantly, as soon as you speak, be berated because they can tell you're a woman by the sound of your voice. If someone's whispering at you to take off your clothes and take a bath and that they want to brush your hair when you're just trying to play a game, it's not right. When the death threats and the rape threats come, it's just a really bizarre kind of thing that happens, and yeah, it can entirely make you feel unwelcome there.
So, Jenny, talk to us a little bit more about the experiences that you've had personally, because the pushback that we'll be getting during this conversation, we'd already started getting actually prior to the conversation, was that this wasn't, quote, GamerGate. So there are some people that see the GamerGate idea as something that was specific to ethics and journalism and nothing to do with gender or online harassment. What would you say to people that take that view?
That's horseshit. The only reason GamerGate got to the level it did is because of the, like Brianna was talking about, the ingrained sexism in online gaming. I mean, lots of gamers, for whatever reason, are bigoted, and it's this weird elitist feeling, like Brianna also was saying, that women don't belong here, and GamerGate was kind of an excuse to let all of those feelings out. It very quickly spiraled out of control and spiraled past being anything even remotely related to gaming journalism ethics, I think. I mean, if you see developers getting death threats and being targeted, and it's not it's not about ethics in gaming journalism.
Shannon, I want to get your thoughts on this. First of all, specific to the hashtag and how you perceive it, and then what the conversation has been dominated by.
So, we started making the movie 2 years before GamerGate took place, and we were kind of finished already by then, and that was just sort of an additional thing that took place after production. And it was sort of the first time that I realized that other people were becoming more aware of this issue. I had been talking to these women for 2 years, and before that they had years and years of experience before they had met me or spoken with me. So I think GamerGate, for me at least, it just seemed like more of the same. It was just the most infamous example of something that we had been focusing on for some time.
And, you're saying it's the most infamous example of something you've been focusing on. Talk to us a little bit about some of the things that you've been finding over the course of your work and research for your film over the last few years.
So initially, when I started, I was a lot more focused on the harassment that takes place in games. So Jenny was actually one of my first interviews, and from there, people would sort of recommend each other for interviews, and so I spoke with professional gamers, developers, writers, artists, journalists, and it became a bigger piece about what is happening to women in games right now, but also the positive strides that women are taking. So, for example, when we featured Brianna at Giant Space Cat, she had a young high schooler who was doing a shadow day, and it was sort of an example of a developer that is, very female-friendly, female-run, and sort of the good steps that people are taking in the right direction rather than just focusing on the negative. Because I think when people look at GamerGate, they kind of say, oh, look at that world of games. Like, I'm not like that. Like, that's something that's so different for me. That's so bizarre. But as Todd Harper said in the movie, games are a reflection of our culture and vice versa. And things that are happening in the games industry are also happening in the rest of the world.
So there's a couple of interesting points you just raised. One of them, I think, is that idea of people looking at what was going on with GamerGate and saying, well, that's not me. I don't understand that. I don't recognize that. That's not me. Brianna, do you think that has played into a difficulty in understanding and also a sort of reluctance maybe by some people to want to recognize what has been happening to women who have been outspoken and actually just simply talking about GamerGate as a concept?
I think I really appreciate that question because I think it's the central problem. I read Kotaku in Action, which is GamerGate headquarters, every single day. And part of that is because I'm trying to monitor GamerGate for threats to my safety. And what I see repeatedly is a really disturbing lack of empathy from GamerGate about what they've done to me, about what they've done to Anita Sarkeesian, and about what they've done to Zoe Quinn. So a pattern that you repeatedly see with them is they to come up with some character attack to tear us down with, right? And the reason that's so important is once they defame our character, once they, say Zoe is like sexually promiscuous, or Anita is a fraud, or I'm a terrible developer who's just out for attention. Once they make these like personal attacks, the function of that is to tear us down and justify the abuse that they give us. And don't take my word for it. Like, read the hashtag GamerGate. Go read the comments on an article that I've done. Read what they're saying about any of the women that have been targeted over at GamerGate headquarters. And what you're going to see is a lack of an ability to understand what they are doing to us. They have a really disturbing lack of empathy. And, I've been asking psychologist friends of mine, like, where is this coming from? What's going on? And, they've really likened it to abusive relationships. If you have, someone that's being, like a husband who's being abusive in a domestic situation, it's the same thing. Very often they're unable to understand the people that they're hurting. So, the irony is, if GamerGate were to sit down with me, on the ethics side, there's a lot we actually agree on. I agree that all too often our gaming journalism industry does not focus enough on consumers. It acts as a publicity wing far too often. And there are legitimate things to be worried about there. And, if this movement could kind of clean up its act, there's a lot of professional work that we could do together. But, I'm a software developer, so I don't care about, declarations of noble intent. I look at the output of what GamerGate is doing. And the simple truth is they're making my life hell, and they're making life hell for a lot of women that work in our field.
So, Brianna, a couple of things there. One of the things is about the idea of a movement and a cohesive movement. Over the last few days, it's been abundantly apparent that whilst there are certain people that are banding together and believe certain things, there doesn't seem to be a sort of cohesive movement. I think that goes into the conversations we've had about the namelessness and the lack of any kind of centralization when it comes to Gamergate. But I think that, again, giving a space to discuss the role of harassment that is played in all of this is equally important. And I want to bring up a clip that we had yesterday. So yesterday we had a few female pro-Gamergaters joining us to discuss the role of media ethics without divorcing the conversation entirely from harassment. Take a listen to what Georgina Young had to say.
I get people on Twitter telling me to go kill myself all the time, or someone hacked my email, someone hacked my PayPal account. I've had emails sent to my dad calling me a slut and things like that. This is not Gamergate who's doing that. This is internet trolls.
So, Georgina made a distinction between Gamergate and internet trolls. Brianna, do you make that distinction?
I do. I want to say this unequivocally, and I want to be crystal clear here. If anyone is sending that woman anything threatening or harassing is absolutely wrong. There's no cause for that, and we cannot have that kind of debate. I think what the biggest difference is between some of the feminists like myself, the leaders like Anita Sarkeesian, me, Zoe Quinn, Randy Harper, is we're very vocal. Look at our record about denunciating that kind of activity. And the problem is with the leaderless movement like Gamergate, there's no one there to kind of set the tone. There's no one there to kind of speak for the organization. And the truth is, as long as they keep operating under this framework, that kind of harassment is going to continue to happen. But it's this no true Scotsman fallacy, and I see it over and over and over again. The plain fact is Gamergate is not willing to be accountable for the harassment, for the death threats, for the swatting, for all the illegal actions that happened to me and the many, many women that have been targeted by them. What we don't even talk about is the climate of fear that Gamergate has created. I'm at PAX Dev this week, and I keep talking to women in my field that are truly terrified by what's going on. It's created an environment where it's very hard to do our jobs.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about that in a second because it gets more into the sphere of gaming in general. But Jenny, I want to get your thoughts on Georgina and what she had to say, and also that question about the distinction between GamerGate and internet trolls.
I also have an issue with the fact that we're trying to say, it comes across as I get all of this, but it doesn't bother me. You know, I get the death threats, the rape threats, whatever, but it's just trolls, none of it's real. Just because it's occurring online doesn't automatically negate the seriousness of the issue. It could still very much so be a real threat. And I think that's something important to remember. Just because it's happening or it starts on the internet doesn't mean that that's where it ends or that it's any less concerning to anyone. You know, I'm already getting pushback for saying that GamerGate being about gaming ethics is horseshit. I think you can't separate GamerGates and trolls. Like, GamerGate might have initially started as being concerns about ethics and gaming journalism, but these trolls started coming out of the woodwork and using it as an excuse to turn it into something more and worse. I don't think you can truly separate the two.
Yeah, what do you think about that? You know, I think Shannon, it's interesting because there has been really another dialogue around that very point that Jenny just brought up.
About the separation between sort of random trolls and trolls who are using GamerGate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sort of their method of attack. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, like Jenny said, there may be people who are part of the movement who do believe that it's about ethics in journalism, but it's kind of hard to see how that would be true because most of the attacks have happened, the vast majority have happened against women. Most of the women aren't journalists. So to say that these things are happening under this banner of GamerGate, but they have nothing to do with us, I think is a fallacy. And like Brianna said, they haven't made any effort to denounce those types of behavior either. So I think if somebody truly is concerned with ethics in journalism, it might be a good idea to try to create a new movement or sort of, I would distance myself personally from something that was attacking and harassing people.
Well, you know, let's talk a little bit about the statistics and the actual nature of the movement at the moment. So earlier this year, the Entertainment Software Association put together a look at what the average gamer looks like in 2015. So they found that the average player is 35 years old, and broken down by gender, the average female player is 43. Now, the average male player is 35. The research also found that 44% of gamers are female and 54% are male. And what's more, women aged 18 or older represent a significantly greater portion of the gaming playing population, which is 33%, than boys aged 18 or younger. So, Shannon, I think to a lot of people that are not in the gaming community, these numbers actually might be quite surprising. Should they be surprised at those numbers?
Well, I hope now that, you know, the movie's out and people are sort of discussing women in games in a much more public, like less niche sphere, I think people are becoming more aware of those facts. Those statistics do, you know, vary depending on how you count it, but I don't know, games are such a huge part of our culture now. It's very rare to find anyone who has never played a video game. So I think that stereotype of the teenage boy playing still exists, but it's becoming less and less true as time goes on.
I want to read a comment here as well. This is from Few Ferriet, who says, in summary, he actually should put out that this person left a rather long comment, so I'm just going to read the summary, and you can read the whole thing. It's in the comments. It says, in summary, harassment is awful. I will not stand for it. I will also not accept the claim that I'm a harasser for using a hashtag to advocate for ethical journalism, especially when I've gone out of my way countless times to report harassment. Your experiences are real, and they do suck. They do not get to erase who I am and what I and countless others stand for with a broad-brushed mislabel. I want to give you the chance to respond, Jenny. What do you think?
I think that's the danger of putting yourself as part of this GamerGate movement, because you're going to be lumped in with the quote-unquote bad eggs. You're going to be lumped in with the harassers and people sending death threats and doing the swatting. The same thing happens to feminists, because people look at anyone who describes themselves as a feminist and says, oh, they hate men. So it sucks, but you're going to get lumped in with that if you associate yourself with a label like that that has negative connotations. inescapable, basically.
Yeah, Brianna, what do you think?
I think that you don't have to take my word for it when I say GamerGate is a movement that's primarily about harassing women. Go to Kotaku in Action, read what Kotaku in Action talks about. Read, like, Google Zoe Quinn on that site, Google Anita Sarkeesian, Google me. And what you're going to see is a movement that predominantly spends its time obsessing about feminism and feminists. That's just a fact. So it falls into this thing. I think, look at what they did with Wikipedia. GamerGate has spent so much time and effort trying to, like, whitewash their Wikipedia page of all these harassing incidents. And, you know, they just, if a credible source comes along and looks at the facts, they go to war with it. It's exactly like Fox News. There are people that, if you say facts about it, they just don't want to hear it. So they spend all their time in this echo chamber. And again, they're just simply unable to understand what they are doing to women in this field.
So I want to talk a little bit about moving forward and trying to kind of, because obviously it's the year anniversary of when the hashtag really started to spark up. And I think a lot of people don't want to be rehashing, particularly I think a lot of the women and some of the men that have also been at the tail end of some of the harassment that we've seen, whether people are pro-GamerGate or we're just simply using the hashtag. Again, as we've said, there is very difficult to like actually label a cohesive understanding of who it is when they're using that hashtag. You know, Shannon, where do you see things being able to evolve, given the statistics we just read about women in gaming?
I think at this point, the biggest impact that GamerGate has had is that now the mainstream media obviously picked up on it last year, and the general public is just much more aware of this issue of women in games. And so I think that's making the industry sort of take notice and realize that they are being watched and scrutinized. And, you know, that maybe is one way that people can start to make changes. But unfortunately, I don't know. I mean, a lot of things have to shift in order for a positive change to take place. So, like you said, the statistics are great in terms of players, but in terms of developers and people in the industry, it's still pretty bad. So there's still a lot more recruiting that needs to happen, a lot more female, women-focused classes or meetups or groups. Like, these things all need to be simultaneously happening, because just having more women play hasn't had the impact that one might hope.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the notion of people within the gaming community, whether male or female, I should say, feeling disenfranchised is something that actually prominent game developer Rami Ismail, who's the co-founder of Lambia, has spoken a bit about on this very much the politics of gaming at the centre of GamerGate. So earlier this year, this is what he had to say, quote, "Very clearly a group of people are completely disenfranchised with the direction games are going in, and they don't know who to blame, so they blame anyone who has any sort of say in the industry, but not the people they like." Jenny, what do you think of his viewpoint?
I think this is kind of, games have evolved to the point where it's no longer just something fun you do in your free time. It's becoming a work of art almost, and there are games that are legitimately pushing the boundaries of what we can do with technology. And I mean, look at BioShock Infinite. It's such a huge, beautiful, expansive universe. So gaming is evolving, and gamers are evolving with it, maybe not as slowly and or as quickly. It's just, I'm sorry, I'm kind of spacing on what to say here.
Well, I mean, you know, it's in terms of your own experience. How would you want your experience as a gamer to be changing in the coming years?
I just want people to listen and understand that this is an issue and not just dismiss it because it happens online. The gaming industry, you know, they've recognized to some extent that women are becoming a bigger part of it, and that, you know, like Shannon said, there are less women in development, and that needs to change too. But if people start listening to this, recognizing that this is an issue, educating themselves on it, and figuring out how to change or fix it, I think education and really just looking at why this is happening and how to fix it are the keys.
You know, on HuffPost Live, we have a lot of conversations around online harassment. So not just harassment unique to anyone within a gaming industry, but also harassment that happens in many different aspects of society and public life. So, you know, everybody really now has a public persona. Anyone who's on social media has an element of publicness. So I think that bringing up and raising the issue of online harassment is extremely important. So, Jenny, I'm glad you underscored that point. Brianna, talk to us a little bit more about the changes, the systemic changes that you'd want to see within the gaming industry as a whole.
I'm so glad you asked me that because, you know, at the end of the day, all of us love games. All of us want to play better games. And you cited some statistics that show that, you know, women are an increasingly large part of the market. And there's a real disconnect between the women that make games, the women that review games, and the women that actually consume games. There's this growing disconnect there. At the end of the day, ultimately, this is about making better games. If you look at the PlayStation 4 and you look at the Xbox One, I see a generation of games that are utterly stuck. We are trying the same violent, boring ideas. We're trotting out the next Call of Duty clone, you know, Assassin's Creed again. And what we're doing for this generation is just rehashing old ideas. What I want to see for the game industry is see us grow from this hall of mirrors that all kind of have the same preferences about the games that they like and get different perspectives so we can have new games there. You know, when women get involved in game development, I truly believe that it leads to a better game. And I think it's not just about women. It's also about including LGBT people. It's also about including people of color. You know, it's about including all these different groups that don't get a say in games to make better games.
Well, I've got a couple of comments I want to read. Brian Penny says, I'm a guy and a gamer and an online troll for that matter, and I can assure you these chicks have a point, hashtag GamerGate. And I've got another one here as well. This is from Droant, who says, because women don't choose to go into gaming, poor women, all these choices. Shannon, address that question for me.
That wasn't really a question.
Well, address the comment, I should say. Forgive me. Address the comment.
I mean, I'm not like criticizing you. I just don't know what exactly to say about that comment. I guess they're critiquing that women have choices in what industry they enter. But I think
the thrust of the comment is that women are not choosing to go into the gaming industry. That's at least the stance of that particular commenter.
Right. That was one of the biggest fears when making GTFO and when editing it. I was really scared of discouraging women from entering this industry because it is at such an exciting point right now. Like Jenny said, there are games that are really artistic and pushing the envelope and cool and creative and world building and really, really exciting right now. And so I would encourage women to join in spite of what they may hear. But at the same time, you know, people need to make choices that result in them being mentally healthy and happy. And I can see how being in an environment like that could be scary for a lot of people. So like Brianna said, the statistics might even be better in tech, which a lot of people look at as one of the worst places to be a woman. But that's even still better than games at this point. But yeah, I mean, it's a tough choice to make, and the women who stick around are really strong, impressive people.
Well, I have to say that, you know, given all of the conversations that we have here on HuffPost Live about women and women's equality and the status quo of women in many industries, certainly gaming isn't unique to the fact that there are not as many women as anyone, I think, would like. And I hope that goes for anyone on either side, if they are looking at this in two sides of a debate, that I think that we can all say that having more women in any sphere is actually going to be beneficial for that industry. I want to thank you, my guests, Brianna, Jenny, and Shannon, for joining me today on HuffPost Live. And guys, thank you very much for your comments, your spirited comments. To find links to all of our guests and, of course, learn more about the conversations we've been having, click the links in our resource world below. And we are covering last year and this year's GamerGate all week here on HuffPost Live. Tomorrow, we're going to be taking a comprehensive look at all of the nuance still embedded in GamerGate. It's going to be right here at 2 p.m. Eastern. Stick around, more HuffPost Live coming up next.